It's highly on video time, and this is indirectly related to HYLN. And I'll be providing commentary over a different video with a whole bunch of people in a room, and they're trying to figure out this energy issue with data centers. And it doesn't involve HYLN, but it involves in the space that they're kind of trying to get into. And this is something from the FERC with Commissioner Christie's concurrence in something called PJM Subsequent Co-Location Proposal ER 24-2172. And Amazon Web Services, they decided to buy a data center and will also take the power from this nuclear generator located in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania. And with this FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the government is now getting involved. And originally there was an article about this where AWS wanted to use this, the electricity generated from a nuclear generator, and it pulled this, it's almost like a startup called HYLN Energy. It pulled them out of bankruptcy because AWS is giving them a lot of money. That article surfaced about 3 months ago, and just recently the government is stepping in. And it's saying, I joined this order because PJM has failed to meet its burden of proof on this record. I emphasize that the filing is rejected without prejudice. So the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which falls under the Department of Energy, says, no, you cannot use the energy from a nuclear reactor to power a data center. Co-location arrangements of this type presented here present an array of complicated, nuanced, and multifaceted issues which collectively could have huge ramifications for both grid reliability and consumer cost. This commission has already acknowledged the importance and complexities of this issue, which is why we held a technical conference to explore them. And this is the video that I'm going to provide commentary over. And then the video is 4 hours long, but I'm only going to provide commentary over 10 to 12 minutes of it. Given these ramifications, the Commission truly needs to get it right when it comes to evaluating co-location issues. Make no mistake, were we to approve this proposal at this time, we would be setting a precedent that would be used to justify identical or similar arrangements in future cases. Lo and behold, Microsoft, they want to restart a 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor for a data center. That article was recently published, but the FERC has not stepped in right now and told them no. Maybe you have to wait a couple months for the no to be given. I don't know. Further to claim, as the dissident does, that failure to approve this specific proposal at this time endangers reliability and even national security is simply unproven on this record. And who is PJM? PJM is a regional transmission organization, RTO, that coordinates the movement of wholesale electricity in all or parts of 13 states and the District of Columbia. So we have Company A. Company A is Talon or Talon Energy. They have something from GE, and it's equipment that cools nuclear reactors, and they use it to generate electricity. And that's for prime power for a data center. And Amazon swept in. They want to buy the data center, and they want to pay for that prime power. But now the government is saying no. And in another situation with HYLN, they also have something from GE that generates electricity, and it also produces prime power, but the rest is not written yet. But we know that, well, I'll comment on it throughout the video here.
Been there, and I have learned to have tremendous respect for the knowledge and insight of all three of them from that experience, those many years in PJM. So it's interesting to see them all here a little bit on different sides. But
so we have a bunch of people in this room. There's probably over 50. They're trying to figure out this energy problem with data centers.
But it's fascinating. Let me ask about it seems to me like this whole issue is going to be very fact specific to each individual arrangement, because there's a lot of differences that could take place. And I want to throw out two different scenarios and ask. I'm going to start with Stu to respond to it, but open it up to everybody. So first scenario, you have a retired generating unit, and a data center goes to the retired generating unit.
And that retired generator unit is 3 Mile Island, and that's done through Constellation Energy, and that's to go to Microsoft, and they want to bring that back online. And
offers to fund the putting it back into service. We've heard about a couple of nukes. We all know, but it didn't have to be a nuke. It could be any generating. It could be gas.
Oh, do we know a company that makes generating units that are powered off of gas? I don't know.
It would seem on the surface that is going to add to capacity in the RTO. That is going to be a net gain potentially. So that's one scenario. You're bringing a retired unit back. Or you have developers who go to a power generating company and say, build us one and we'll pay for it. So
do we know of companies that can build generators? And this is kind of coming into like, how long does it take to make and how much does it cost? We don't have the answers to that, and that's what's frustrating.
Building an entirely new unit, you're bringing it back, or you're building a new one. So it seems like those might be net additions. Second scenario, though, is what we hear about, and that is where you're taking an existing unit that's running right now and serving load.
And that's the situation with Pennsylvania. This is the one that AWS wants to tap into and use its power from.
And you're taking it out of the supply stack and you're putting it behind the meter. And in that scenario, it looks like it might. It is that a net loss? Is that and a twist to that one is this. And Mike, I'd like you to comment on this, but the rest of you as well. So you take you take an existing generating unit serving load, you put it behind the meter, you say it's only paying directly through a PPA. The data center is paying directly through a PPA. That raises two questions in my mind. Number one, if that generating unit goes down, what happens? Does the customer get to still draw power from the grid? Because if it does, that's going to have a huge impact. And if the unit that is in the PPA happens to be nuclear, it is going to be on the grid.
So if you have a nuclear generator, it is required from regulatory standpoint to be connected to the grid. So they just can't take a nuclear reactor and just unplug it from the grid. It has to be connected to it.
You cannot take it off the grid. The NRC won't let you. So
the difference for me, just sort of working backwards, is on that last question. To me, it's not the load getting the services. The load is putting itself at risk, is going to be basically have to shed if the generator trips. Now, I don't think it's as big as issue. I understand Sue's concern, but every data center, even those in front of the meter, fully back themselves up with self-generation. Mm-hmm. That's just a fact of life. So going behind the meter in this format isn't that big of a cost increase for them, because they're planning on putting their own backup generation in no matter what because of that. And they can decide. But I think, going to Sue's point, I don't think we should decide. That's the customer's decision if that's the risk they want to take, as long as they understand the rules as to when they get rejected or not.
Well, that gets to the rule, because that's what I'm going to ask you. Because Stu, in his comment, said we need to do some general. I'm going to ask you to comment on it in a second. So it seems like what you're saying is, okay, if the generator is going to go out of the supply stack behind the meter and contract with the PPA with the customer,
Yes.
that they ought to have to sign some legally binding arrangement that if the generator goes down, they will have sufficient backup generation and they will not seek any services from the grid. Is that possible even?
So it's definitely possible. I mean, it puts a risk on that load as to how much will they have to self-supply, or can they shed that load in reality? And this goes to, I mean, Commissioner Chang. I mean, there may be some huge advantages there that they can take advantage of that in the today's market would not otherwise be able to be monetized at. So I think that, and I think that is in the interconnection agreement. I don't want to speak for Stu, and I don't want to get in any cases before the commission. But yeah, I think that should be memorialized in the interconnection agreement, what that arrangement is, what the breaker configuration is. If you want to have penalties in there, should something fail inadvertently, I would support that as well.
Well, let me just ask you then, because, okay, crypto miners can do that. They're doing.
Now he's bringing up crypto miners. They mine imaginary coins and consume a lot of electricity. That's one case.
In Texas, they're glad to take a check to go off the grid, when called upon. But if that data center is running a North American air defense system, it ain't going off.
Then co-location behind.
So now he's bringing up air defense, which falls under the Department of Defense. And now we're getting a situation where you have one department, the Department of Energy, talking about another department, Department of Defense, and data centers.
Behind the meter may not be their best option. I would agree. But shouldn't we let the customer make that decision? I mean,
well, but what are the societal interests? And it sounds like we almost have to decide what are those data centers running. And maybe they're running DraftKings, and society says we want our DraftKings.
And again, I would agree. And I think that, again, if the Department of Defense is contracting with these
Department of Defense contracting with something,
data centers to run national.
With data centers for national security, HYLN brought someone on for commercialization that has experience with data centers.
National defense. I would assume they're going to be very interested in this question. And yes, they may say, you can't co-locate in this manner, or we want to see sufficient. But I would agree. I think, but again, I go back to that should be a customer decision.
I completely agree there with the speed element. As the commission noted earlier, and all of the above approach is really needed to.
So this gentleman is from Talon Energy, the company that has that nuclear generator in Pennsylvania that AWS wants to tap into, but the government is saying no.
To address the issues here. And we think it's going to be a lot of different unique, I heard Snowflake earlier, but a lot of these different unique circumstances that are going to need to be addressed. And we do think the RTO and the local utility and the generator are most equipped to do that at the local level. If not, there is going to be uncertainty. And as my colleague here mentioned, that's going to start driving the load elsewhere. And I think there's two key impacts of driving the load elsewhere. Because the load is coming, right? And we don't have to wait. We don't have till 2030 to wait for solving this.
So that puts a time frame of under 6 years. It needs to be done faster than that.
The first impact is national security, and
Department of Defense comes up again.
And bear with me. Let me just read two sentences from a recent White House memorandum on AI regarding national security. If the U.S. government does not act with responsible speed and in partnership with industry to make use of AI capabilities in service of the national security mission, it risks losing ground to strategic competitors. Ceding the U.S. technological edge would not only greatly harm American national security, but also undermine U.S. foreign policy objectives.
So they're trying to use AI as a means for justifying the need for electricity to power the data centers because of artificial intelligence. And if the United States falls behind in the AI race it will weaken national security.
We do not have till 2030 to figure this out. The second impact is going to stunt economic development across the country. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar investment collectively for all these data centers, and we need them in the United States. We need them in our states that desperately need this investment and this growth.
So now there's a demand for data centers, build more of them, which will cause an even greater demand for energy. Who's going to be generating this energy? Where's this energy going to be coming from? Are we just going to build that mile by mile, square mile of solar panels and just there'll be enough energy? Or do we actually need to build another square mile of solar panels just for the data centers? Or is there some other solution floating out there?
And the state should control their destiny for that. They should not be dictated to and told that they can't figure out innovative ways to help their constituents, their stakeholders, their ratepayers, ensuring reliability, et cetera. Two other points I just want to quickly kind of piggyback on, that were talked about earlier today. So one, I think it's important to remember that generators are not under an obligation to serve, and I know the Commission's full well aware of that, given the shift away from that to the RTO structure. But as a generator, we're looking to contract out our megawatts and contract our power, and obviously co-location is an attractive way to do that and ensure the longevity of our power plants. And then the other point I want to just hit on is co-located load. I've heard a couple of folks say, can you fully isolate co-located load? The answer simply is yes, you can. You can do that contractually through an ISA or interconnection service agreement. And you heard, I think it was Mr. Cormos talking a little bit about that earlier. And you can also do that through protective schemes with equipment. And I think some people have challenged whether that's possible. And I'll just maybe humor me with an example from my experience. I was a Navy nuke on a submarine.
Oh, he's with the Navy. Do we know a company that has a contract with the Department of the Navy Research? I don't know.
And we had protective relays in place to protect the reactor in case extraordinary circumstances happened and really high consequence scenarios. And so if we are able to rely on relay schemes for a national security asset like a ballistic missile submarine, we should be able to rely on these kind of schemes for protecting the grid from co-located load.
Before we turn to you, I just want to underscore the point you made about national security. I think it's critically important. Almost every panelist we had on the previous panel raised the issue, and I'm glad that you put it on the table for this panel as well.
So national security is of utmost importance. It's been reiterated multiple times throughout this FERC meeting, and they're trying to wedge artificial intelligence as the need to keep national security strong. And to do that, you need lots of data centers and lots of energy powering those data centers, and this energy needs to be generated from somewhere, and they're trying to build nuclear power plants to do that. However, they're encountering interference from the Department of Energy.
Well,
and I totally agree with everything that was said, and including emphasizing the national security need of this particular load growth. But there is load that is growing, and from the perspective of a merchant generation operator, we want to be there to serve it. Constellation Energy is the largest operator of nuclear units, and we've been in a situation where
now this gentleman is from Constellation Energy, and they are bringing back online they're going to repurpose a nuclear reactor from 3 Mile Island to help power a data center for Microsoft. But the Department of Energy, or the FERC, has not stepped in yet and told them no, but we know the writing's on the wall. So
where nuclear units have retired because they did not have sufficient market support. That led to a number of state programs and then ultimately a federal program that will be rolling off right as 40% of our fleet is turning over their 20-year NRC licenses. So from our perspective, the opportunity to serve this critically important load creates a long-term commercial pathway to relicensing, continuing to operate our fleet.
A long-term commercial pathway, a pathway to commercialization.
Evaluating the opportunity to uprate and having the fleet to build upon the existing fleet to build a new fleet of reactors upon. And you can only do that with the financial security of the existing fleet, which will either be through market mechanisms or through continued subsidy programs. That is the reality. We are interested in serving data center loads because we see that market opportunity, and it is on a long-term tenure, which is different than the PJM market. Most of our assets operate in the PJM market. We certainly offer our capacity in that market, but we also offer our capacity bilaterally. And if a customer is interested in contracting for that capacity bilaterally, we want to serve that load, and we believe the market mechanisms are in fact designed to encourage us to serve that load. It could be front of the meter. It could be co-located behind the meter. Our restart of 3 Mile Island is an example of bringing on restarting a nuclear plant because of the 20-year contract that we have with Microsoft. That is enabling that investment and expansion. We are interested in serving customers with our existing assets through grid connections. We are also interested in co-location. We think this is a broad spectrum of issues, and we appreciate the kind of breadth of the way that the conversation has been put forward today, because we think that's what it's really about. Kind of as was said, how are we going to manage the resource adequacy and infrastructure challenges of growing load, which we've all seen coming for some time, and it's actually here now. So let's collaboratively work on the solutions to get there. Respectfully, I think over-rotating on co-location versus grid connection is a bit of a distraction from some of the bigger challenges that we have that are going to require that collaboration. Things like, well, of course load wants to pay its fair share. What does fair mean for a load that has no ability to pull power from the grid? It's not gross load. Is it something else? We can have a conversation about that, but when you have litigation positions that are so far apart, then it makes it difficult, and ultimately it's the job of the regulator to call balls and strikes.
So there's a demand. They're trying to online nuclear reactors. Department of Energy is getting in the way. These energy providers are saying, well, we need data centers for artificial intelligence, and that will strengthen national security, and we can't fall behind because other countries are going to figure out the AI thing and figure out the power thing, but, well, the energy thing. But you have a situation where they're trying to online it with a nuclear power plants, and the government's stepping in and telling them no. And so they're having a very large discussion about how do we solve this problem. Is there a company, or are there multiple solutions out there that provide an answer to this problem? That remains to be foreseen. That's it for this video, and of course, thanks for watching.